Welcome back to the Talking Archive. My name is Josh Jacobs. We're talking with voiceover artist and radio personality Jeff Davis, concluding our conversation. Now, Jeff, you had gotten a gig with KBIG 104 back in 1999. Tell us about how you got that job.
Got a call from Steve Street over at KBIG 104, and another case where I didn't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that they had and the only reason I knew Steve Street is because I wrote Steve a letter telling him that his disco Saturday night sucked. And I said, you got songs like Sky High by Pilot. That's not a disco record. The Disco Saturday Night, whatever the hell they called it. And he thought that was funny, and he called me up, and he wanted me to come in and meet him, and I went in and then talked with him, and they had hired a guy to do afternoons. He was getting ready to do this great overhaul of KBIG 104, and the guy backed out of the deal, and Steve called me and he said, "I need you on my station," and I said, "Oh no, not this again." And he said, "No, I really need you to do afternoons. We hired a guy from Santa Barbara to do afternoons, and he decided that he wasn't going to come. And we're launching this thing a week from Sunday or whatever it was." I said, "Well, it better not be sooner than that because I'm on vacation. I'm going to my mother's house." I said, "Can't do it." And he said, "Well, come on that Sunday, and we'll go through the Sunday you get back. We'll go through all of the crap, with the new format and all this other stuff." So I did that, and I said, "Look, I'll work until you find someone to do afternoons." I said, "But this isn't a permanent job for me." I said, "I'll do it because you're caught short." I said, "But this is not a job." I said, "I'm just doing this to help you out." And a period of time went by, and I realized that he was a real piece of work. And allegedly, he was doing Xanax like candy, according to one of the people there, and it was showing itself. And I went into the general manager at that time, and I told him, I said, "You're going to have problems. You're going to have problems." I said, "I'm just telling you, you're going to have a problem." I said, "Because things are just not right." I had the promotion director who came into me. She was a woman, and she was crying her eyes out. And she said that Steve said that women should not even be in radio and all this other stuff. And I said, "Well, all I can tell you is keep all your records, and anything that he leaves you on an answering machine, save it, because you use it later." And I think she did.
Wow.
So at the end of 4 months or so, Steve said, "I want you to do 2 to 7 p.m. And I said, "I don't do a 5-hour radio show for anybody." No, he wanted me to do, 2 to 7. Only it was 3 to 7. And I said, "I'm not going to do 5 hours on any radio station." And I said, "You're forgetting that I came here to help you out." He said, "Well, I really need you. You're the best jock I have." Those are his words, not mine. Mm-hmm. And Lance Balance was doing middays.
That's right, yeah.
Lance was scared shitless that he was going to get fired, and I told him just chill. And so again, I had to go in and say, "Man, you want to try to intimidate me? I do not intimidate." And so he one of the things that I noticed about him was that he would come in and he would put his hands on your neck, around your neck or whatever, and he would say something that was reassuring, and then he'd hit you with a zinger. So I got up. I was sitting in his office, and I got up, and I went around back behind him and did the same thing that he did to other people. Mm-hmm. And I said, "This is what you do when you get ready to intimidate someone." And I said, "And I'm not, you're not capable of intimidating me." on Monday, come 2 o'clock, you're going to have an hour of dead air because I ain't going to be there. And he said, you hate me. And I said, I don't hate anybody. I'm just telling you I don't do a 5-hour air shift for anybody. And I'd already talked to the AFTRA representative who called me and said she had heard there's trouble over at KBIG. And I said, well, you've got a program director who's got issues, and he has a tendency to be very cruel. And I said, I'm getting ready to quit. And she said, no, don't quit. You're only a week away from qualifying for your insurance. I said, all right, well, I'll make him fire me then. And so that's when I went in and did that whole routine.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, look, I don't hate you. I don't hate you at all. I just am not doing a 5-hour air shift. And but I already had a plan because I knew another DJ who's out of work, and he had a little, I think he had a 3-year-old daughter,
mm-hmm.
Mike Showalter. And I called Mike, and I said, Mike, I'm getting ready to bail here. Get me a tape real quick. I said, because I'm going to take it into the assistant PD and pitch you to see if you can, get the job. And I did that, and he worked there for 2 years, doing the shift that I left.
Wow.
But, I helped a lot of people like that. And, there are other people that'll vouch for that, that I helped them get work or I got them better work than what they had. But
well, that KBIG 104 was such a wreck. I remember they were calling it KBIG 104. And they were, well, WNBC. And I'm like, what the heck is this? Because I had not heard about that WNBC yet. And they had like a parody of a new sensation called A New Radio Station. And it just, I remember they had Delilah from 7 to midnight. And that was some of the worst automation I'd ever heard.
I was the first to, I was the first one to be on the air to join her show on KBIG.
Mm-hmm.
It was really funny because they were saying, now, we have to join her at exactly straight up. And I said, I can do that. I had a cold ending record, and damned it just hit right on the mark. And they said, how in the hell did you do that? I said, it's called math. You just add up the time of your record and make sure that you start it at the time you need to back time to get to the top of the hour. And they said, well, that was perfect. But it was so easy. Things that are hard for some of these people are easy to someone who's done it for a long time.
Obviously, they've never worked for like Satellite Music Network or Westwood One, where they always had a time at the top of the hour to make sure you're out by, I think 59:50 in order to do the legal ID to then let the radio stations either continue on with your feed or to go into their own local programming. And then I remember they had like Rick Diego and Carolyn Gracie in the morning with, I think, Mother Love reading the news.
Mother Love, oh my God.
She'd been on the old 97, Real Talk 97.1 for a brief moment back in the mid-'90s when they flipped from classic rock to shock talk, or whatever that format was called. And then Charlie Tune eventually took over after Mother Love. And then eventually Delilah got replaced with a show that was hosted by Billy Burke, which was kind of a predecessor to what Jack FM would be, kind of a playing what we want type of format of a variety of music, which I actually enjoyed because it was different. It was a lot better than Delilah's, very middle-of-the-road, easy listening. It was kind of that was a train wreck, that K-Big.
This is, it's purely my interpretation, and I'm sure there will be a lot of people who disagree with me. I'm certain of it. But outside of KHJ and KISS FM, LA radio, to me, isn't that good. It wasn't that good.
Mm-hmm.
KHJ was fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
It really was great. And then you also had, KISS FM, which certainly was a market leader. But other radio stations in town that tried, 10Q and I think to a degree K-Earth back in the day, and other stations were just okay. But you look at some markets like Chicago or New York; those markets were really cooking. And maybe it's my taste in music; it could very well be that. But here you had KHJ had legendary personalities, and Kiss FM, of course, had legendary personalities as well. But other radio stations you can't really say much about from the standpoint of people who left an indelible mark on the industry.
Well, KRLA 1110 back in the 1960s.
Well, then, yeah, of course, back in the 60s. I'm talking basically 70s.
Oh, okay, yeah, definitely. Because KRLA, they could have been... There's a book that was written about almost 30 years ago called Dream House. And it was a comprehensive history of KRLA radio from its dawn of top 40 radio up until the present day, which was 1991. And the author of the book was a guy named Bill Earl, who eventually became a teacher and was a Pasadena State College student. And he had written the book originally as a thesis, an 8-page thesis about KRLA while at Pasadena State College, and kept adding to it and self-published it. And KRLA was coming on strong in 1971 against KHJ with world-famous Tom Murphy in the morning, and they had Lee Baby Sims and Dick Saint, who Don Steele actually gave his name Dick Saint because his real name was Richard Middleton. Tom Murphy told me the funny story about how he and Middleton and Steele were at kissing up in Portland one day in the kitchen, and Don Steele just out of the blue says, "His name is Dick Saint," and Tom said, "What's the matter with Dick Middleton?" And Don says, "That's lame." And Murphy said, Dick Saint didn't care. He just kept on drinking his beer and, act as if the insult had never happened.
I wasn't as familiar with KRLA, but I do remember there was a song, and I can't remember what song it was, and the lyric went, "KRLA is on the radio." That was a mid-chart hit, and I can't remember what record that was. I want to say it might have been Cashman and West or someone like that. But
wow,
that was my first acknowledgement of KRLA. But those radio stations, they left their mark, and those personalities really deserve a lot of credit.
Oh yeah,
they generally do. Anyway, I'm going to have to run pretty soon.
Hey, Jeff, this has been a great conversation, and I've loved it was great. I mean, even better than I was hoping.
I could talk for hours, I've already talked your ear off as it is.
By the way, what's the best piece of advice you were ever given by a radio mentor?
I think probably for me to just be myself. I think that Art Roberts had one of the best pieces of advice ever, and that was, when you're on the radio, you're talking to one person. You're talking to a single person, and you make a connection with that person, then you will connect with your audience. And I think that was some of the best advice I've ever heard, even though I had heard that prior to even meeting Art. But that, those two pieces of advice I think are about the best you can give people. Although you talk to a lot of old pros these days, they'll say, "Best advice I can tell you is not to get into radio." But I think that there's still a career out there. People very often will take radio and they'll say, "Well, everybody's listening to satellite radio now." That's not true. There are probably people out there that have satellite radio, Sirius XM, which I listen to a lot. But those are people who want to pay for radio. There are people who've got it in their cars. There are a ton of people out there that don't. A huge number of people who listen to radio. For that matter, there are a huge number of people who listen to AM. Because there is certain programming they can get on AM, sports and things like that, they can't get on FM. Maybe they can watch TV, but you're not always by your television. So sometimes you want to do that. Talk radio always been very good on AM, even though most of the stations that WLS and KVOR are outliers. They do have I believe that they do have FM subcarriers that they broadcast on. They don't really promote it.
Mm-hmm.
WSB is on full tilt on FM. I think even though they call it WSB, it's really WSBB. And then they've got WSB AM, which is still up, which gets out much further, on the skip.
Mm-hmm.
But, a lot of talk stations, news talk stations, have now ported over to the AM. I think 1010 Winds just did that in New York today,
mm-hmm.
maybe a day or so ago.
Wow.
But, so you've got, I think it was alt, whatever the alt station was, went 1010 Winds got that.
Oh, yeah. I think, what was it, 92.3 K-Rock, I think it was, or 92.7 K-Rock, where Howard Stern was on for many years.
Yeah.
It was alternative for a long time. Actually, before that was classic rock when Stern first came on there. Then it switched to alternative, and I think it eventually did become FM talk, like Free FM was called. But then after that became Now FM, and the Now FM station here in LA is now 97.1 KNX FM, ironically, which is kind of weird to think that KNX FM is now 97.1 instead of 93.1. But I don't know. It's weird just seeing that, because I thought, that's kind of a waste of an FM signal. But what do you do? I mean, you got the internet's kind of like a free canvas, with. And the world's your oyster with the internet, which is nice. So that kind of makes up for the radio signals kind of simulcasting again and stuff.
Want to hear one of the biggest screw ups ever?
Sure.
Back when Charlie Seraphin and Kurt Kelly were talking about changing KNX FM to an oldie station, I went in, they had me in the meetings. We were brainstorming about different things to do and all that stuff, and they were talking to me about logos and all that. I wanted multicolored type stuff, which they ended up going with that theme. But I told them they were considering several different call letters for the station. And I said, why not 93 KHJ?
Mm-hmm.
And Seraphin said, nobody remembers KHJ. I said, are you shitting me? I said, of course they remember KHJ. KHJ was legendary. And they said, well, there's a radio station up in the upper Midwest or something like that was using KHJ. And I said, pay them for it. And they said, well, we don't think anybody would care about it. I said, look, if you did 93 KHJ, I guarantee you would immediately have an audience. And they said, no, we don't think so, and they didn't do it.
Mm.
They could have been something, but they didn't do it.
Oh man!
And anyway, that's just a little aside there. How some things don't happen that should.
Oh, definitely.
Anyway.
It's too bad they didn't listen to the talent, because that would have been awesome. That would have been great.
Been awesome. I mean, and then later, as you know, they did have some legendary people. I was back there. I went back there when Tommy Edwards was there for a short period of time.
Okay, what did you do?
I was on the air doing middays. I hated it. Hated studio with a passion. And then somebody in New York alerted Tommy that I had bailed on them the first time when I went over to K-Earth. I didn't even want the job. Again, this is the third job that I did not want. And Tommy came in one day and they said they're telling me that I have to let you go. And I said, show me the door. I'm ready to leave. And at that time, Charlie was there,
mm-hmm.
and who else?
Real Don Steele, Machine Gun Kelly.
Yeah. I worked with all three of them at that time.
Oh, okay.
So brief. It was so unbelievably brief. But
I think Rich Fields was there, and eventually he became the announcer of The Price is Right about a dozen years later.
Yeah, Rich was great. I liked Rich a lot. He was fascinated with WLS for one thing, and I remember Charlie later, before Charlie died, Charlie called me and he asked me to help him set up his studio because he wanted to do voice work. And he was asking me a lot of questions, what equipment should he get and all that stuff, and I gave him a list. But
I had no idea that Charlie was ill. I mean, that was a complete shocker when he had passed away.
I was just as shocked as you are. M.G. Kelly I saw later again we went. A friend of mine arranged for a concert with it was a Yes concert, and we all sat together, and I think he was flying that day. But
I got to work with MG because I actually interned with Oldies 93 from September 1992 till about February 1993. And then Sean McNamara Steele, Don's wife, was working there at the time, and she hired me for a series of jobs, like to tabulate the top 500 as voted by the listeners, and then mail out the top 500 list and a couple other of odd jobs. So I never met Don Steele, but I'm forever grateful to Sean for giving me my first paid gig in radio.
I met Don at K-Earth because I went back and I did some substitute work there at K-Earth, and they had me coming in to do some production because they had no one to do. They had no one who they had to sub for production, so I went in there and helped them out when they were shorthanded. But most of the time, I brought my production back to my studio and then brought it back to K-Earth because I really did not like their setup there.
Wow.
But my studio was set up so the mic was fit to my voice and all that stuff, so I just brought everything back here and did it.
Another thing I was taught, speaking of Don, because when I was interning with Oldies 93, the first jock I hung out with was Benny Martinez, who was filling in for Machine Gun Kelly that day. He said, okay, make sure to always keep your cup of water to the sideboard. You never have it in front of the console, because he said one time Paul Freeman had a cup of noodles during the all-request hour, and his papers got ruffled, and he accidentally knocked the cup of noodles over the board. It was out of commission for a couple hours, and they had to use the backup studio. Then another time, this was a couple years later, the real Don Steele had a cup of coffee at KRF 101, knocked it over the console, and it ruined the console.
I love Paul Freeman. I worked with him at Star.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You know, he is one of the most creative and very naturally funny guys that I've ever worked with. I did a big countdown show for New Year's Eve, and he came up here and cut his tracks, and then I assembled everything. Everybody else did their thing, and I assembled it and all that stuff. And that was 1995, New Year's Eve 95.
Wow.
And that was really, I still have the master on that, and it was just fun as hell. But anyway, Paul was just one of the best people to work with. He was great, fun, just really very talented.
Yeah, he was. I enjoyed him on Oldies 93 and then Star 98.7. And I never got to hear him on Kiss FM because he was there before that. But great talent. And I've heard he's retired now, or maybe he's doing some voiceover. I'm not sure. Did you still keep in contact with him?
I haven't. You know, I really should. I should also go because my battery's
on the
phone.
Cool. Well, Jeff, thanks for talking with me.
All right, buddy. You take care. I really enjoyed talking with you. It was
you
fun.
too. Thank you. Appreciate that, and have a great evening.
You too. Take care.
And we've been talking with the voiceover artist and radio personality Jeff Davis, who's the imaging voice of 89 WLS in Chicago, where he was previously a disc jockey when it was Top 40 radio, as well as WSB Atlanta and many other stations. This is the Talking Archive. My name is Josh Jacobs, and until next time, keep your mind on the things above, and as you hit that open road, don't be a slut on spectator.